Well, we're looking forward to UFC 230, and joining me looks like straight out of the cage, Dan, and you've got the cut-off vest ready to rumble.
Mate, she's fight week. She's fight camp. It's fight training. Nah, it's hard times, when you're training 7 days a week and pushing it pretty hard. So I live like a caveman during fight camp.
So you like chicken, broccoli and rice at the moment?
Not at this stage. Just had a nice salmon Benedict with the boys. So it'll be not till the last 2 or 3 weeks where we kind of strict diet chicken and broccoli.
Oh, yuck. All right, the first fight we're going to look at on UFC 230, of course, headlined by Cormier Lewis, but we'll get to that one later. The first one up, Brian Kelleher against Montel Jackson. Brian Kelleher, looking at him, he's quite an unpredictable sort of guy, quite relentless.
Yeah, he's a real interesting character. I've seen him fight a few times before, and he's really impressed me. He's like a switch stance, pressure fighter. He just really likes to stay in guys' faces and kind of wear them down and put on a lot of pressure. And it's been successful. He actually beat the former bantamweight world champion Renan Barão by that same style, just staying in his face and staying on him. So against Jackson's fairly new. He came off Dana White's Contender Series, and he's had one fight in the UFC, one loss. So he's also had his first loss, so it'll be interesting to see how he deals with that. But he's like a big, long southpaw. Got heavy hands, but from what I've seen on tape, he doesn't do so well when he does get pressured, because he's so big and so long. Once a smaller man gets underneath him, he doesn't seem to handle that so well. So I'm looking for Kelleher to put the pressure on and pick up a fairly dominant decision win in this one.
Decision dominant. I'm making notes. It's going to be a multi at the end of this. Then we've got Shane Burgos, the Hurricane, against Kurt HOLOBAUGH. Interesting story, Shane Burgos. Been fighting since he was 14. He's living his dream, he says, and he's just an out-and-out fighter. Got some great tats too. But Kurt HOLOBAUGH's had 3 wins. He had 3 losses in the UFC, but he's had 3 wins away from the UFC and gets his invite back.
Yeah, so Shane Burgos, he's a phenomenal puncher, like very good boxing. Some of the slickest boxing, in the division. I think his last fight against Calvin Kattar, they had a war. They had one of my favorite fights of the year, and it was like a very intense back and forth boxing match. So he's a very slick striker, very defensively responsible, very long reach, 75.5 reach for the featherweight division, which is incredibly long. HOLOBAUGH, he's an aggressive guy. He's tough. He's got a lot of experience, but he's just a bit too hittable for my liking. Like he takes a few too many shots for my liking. I think the slicker Shane Burgos will kind of pick him apart. He's more defensively responsible, gets hit a lot less, and I think he'll pick him apart and perhaps even stop him in the later rounds. So I'm picking up a TKO win for Burgos.
Yeah, I saw HOLOBAUGH's had 9 first-round knockout wins. So he likes to get it done early.
Very aggressive, aggressive, but with that aggression kind of comes the openings where he does leave himself open and he does wear a lot of shots. Once you're not in the UFC and you're fighting like lower tier guys that don't have that kind of power and that sort of composure, it's all right. But when they get to that kind of elite level, then they kind of get picked apart and they get knocked out pretty early.
Good name here, Matt the Steamroller FREVOLA, taking on a very busy kind of fighter in Lando VANNATA, who mixes up KO wins with submission wins, had a couple of decisions as well. Is this evenly matched, or do you favour one?
Yeah, I definitely favour one in this fight. So old FREVOLA is a bull in a china shop. Like he comes out and he kind of just swings with reckless abandon, which has done him fairly well until I think his last fight he was knocked out for the first time. So another one, like it's very interesting to see how a fighter comes back after their first loss, especially how will that affect like his aggression. Will he be that same bull in a china shop? Because he did get clipped last time and put to sleep. Very tough test in this one. Lando VANNATA is one of my favorites in the division. I've seen this guy rock Tony Ferguson, the #1 contender in the division. So he's up against a very tall task. And I feel like Lando VANNATA is just on another level. I think he'll be able to pick FREVOLA apart. And I feel like he will stop him in the later rounds again. Just too slick, moves too well for a guy being that aggressive. Like he's a bit too elusive for old FREVOLA.
Because guys, the bull in the china shop sort of guys, while they're just relentless, it is a matter of just being patient against them, isn't it?
Well, when they come up against like a guy with the composure, VANNATA's been in there with Tony Ferguson. He's been in with the best guys in the world. So when you're up against the elites and the guys don't panic when a guy comes out swinging, like when you come out swinging, most guys early on, they kind of panic and freeze up or try to throw back just as hard, and that's when they get clipped.
Next one up, Lyman Good. Nickname Cyborg. That's not fair. And Ben Saunders, Killer B. 2 out-and-out strikers here.
Yeah, Saunders is actually pretty versatile. To be honest, he has a very good Muay Thai game. Very tall, likes to kick a lot. Loves his knees, good elbows and good knees. Saunders was actually one of the guys I first started following when I got into the sport. He was one of my first favorites. One of my first favorite fighters when I first started watching the sport. So it's very good to see him on his second UFC run, and he's doing a bit hot and cold. He's coming off a submission loss, but he does have some submission wins. So he is versatile. He can mix it up on the ground, and he does have good striking. Lyman Good, he's an athlete. Like he is an athletic guy. Like he is.
I'm looking at his photo, man. He is ripped. I don't want to fight him.
He is what you would think a UFC fighter looks like. If you put a UFC fighter on a poster, he looks good on a poster. Let's just say that. But in terms of skill, I feel like Ben Saunders has the bigger skill base. He's the more technical fighter. Lyman Good as well. He's coming off a loss, and then before that, a 2-year layoff. So he had a lot of time out from the sport. I think Ben Saunders, he has been hot and cold lately. I think he's 1-3 in his last 4, 1 win, 3 losses. But they were very exciting fights against very good opponents. I think he's just the more technical guy. I feel like this fight's like the technician versus the athlete. Skill versus out-and-out aggression. So I'm going to back skill, and I feel like Saunders maybe picks up the knockout or submission. I'm leaning more towards the submission.
Julio Arce, hell of a name, against Shimon MORAES. I'm just looking at Moraes' record, 50% KO, 50% decision. So he can go the distance.
Yep, so Moraes is 1-1 in the UFC. His only loss was to Zabit Magomed, so one of the hottest prospects in the UFC, and I felt like he did quite well. He took that fight on, I believe, on short notice, and he did very well. He's a very composed striker, very clean, very defensively responsible. Like he rolls and catches punts well, and he doesn't get like overwhelmed very easily. Old Arce, I think 2-0 in the UFC, and he's on a 7-fight win streak, so he's got a lot of momentum behind him. He's from a very strong team. And I'm leaning with Arce in this one. I feel like he's just more versatile and he can mix things up a lot better. Whereas Moraes is kind of stuck into the striking. I feel like Arce will compete with him in the striking, but he also has the added element of a good wrestling and a good submission game. So I'm picking up a decision for Arce.
Women's fight now, Sijara Eubanks against Roxanne MODAFFERI, however they want to say her name. She was in one of the Contender Series, wasn't she? I recognise her face. Was she in one of the...
She's been on, I believe, 2 of the Ultimate Fighter TV shows. So she was on... Yeah, she was on the most recent... They were both on the most recent season of the Ultimate Fighter.
And she doesn't look like a UFC fighter. She looks like a kindergarten teacher.
I know. She's a very unassuming character, but she's actually one of the most experienced female MMA fighters in the world. I think she's got over 30 professional fights, which is a lot of fights for the sport is fairly young for female athletes, so she has a ton of experience. Eubanks has not the best looking record, but she has done quite well on the Ultimate Fighter TV series. Funny story, she actually got a title shot on the same card against Shevchenko. She was supposed to fight for the belt, but there was such an uproar from the viewing public that someone with a 3-2 record was getting a UFC title shot that the UFC kind of had to pull the fight, scramble, and then replace it with Cormier Lewis. So she's feeling a bit hard done by. She's feeling like she's got a bit of a chip on her shoulder and she's got something to prove. These two have actually fought in the Ultimate Fighter house with EUBANKS getting the win. And I feel like not enough time has developed, has been that MODAFFERI will make like big adjustments in her game. So I'll look for EUBANKS to kind of outstrike her and defend the takedowns and pick up another decision victory.
Then we go to Jason Knight, who just standing there looks like he's been in 1,000 fights. He's a mess of an individual against Jordan Ronaldo, USA against USA. Both got about the 60% submission success rate. So will this one go to the floor, do you think?
Yep, I think this one will. So Rinaldi 2-1 in the UFC, and that was at lightweight. So I feel like he's making the drop down to featherweight for the first time against this one. He is a pretty technical guy. He is pretty technically good. But the big but in this fight is that when he gets pressured, he does not do so well. He doesn't react properly. He kind of just shells up and kind of wears the damage, which is terrible, terrible news for him in this fight because, as I know, Jason Knight is damn relentless. Like, this guy is a pressure fighter. He'll stay in your face. He doesn't mind if it's on the feet, if it's on the ground. Like, he's just constantly attacking, throwing up submissions and strikes. And I'm looking for him to stop him in the later rounds. Once he does get tired, he's just, they call him the Mississippi Zombie for a good reason. You know, he just walks guys down, eats a lot of shots, but he's a pressure fighter. He's as pressure fighter as they come. So I think he breaks old Rinaldi in the later rounds.
Jason Knight, late KO. Then we've got our old mate Israel Adesanya, the style bender, taking on Derek Brunson. Man, I was watching some video of Derek Brunson yesterday. He is dangerous. He looks dangerous. Can Izzy stop him?
Yeah, I feel like Brunson is, you know, he definitely deserves the place he has. The number 6 ranked middleweight in the world. The guy is a killer. He's very good with his hands. He can take guys out with one shot. He had a very good matchup against the champion, Robert Whittaker. I think I fought on the same card as that, in which he like rocked Robert Whittaker fairly early with one of his punches. But swarming for the finish, he got clipped and taken out. But that's just the style of fighter that he is. He does take risks. You know, he will push for the finish. He will overreach for the finish, trying to take guys out. Israel feels like he has Brunson's number. He feels like he's watched him fight before and he knows exactly how this fight's going to play out. He feels like he overreaches on his shots and he leaves himself a little bit too exposed, and he can pick up the knockout on a counter punch. Yeah,
I was going to say, is it a counter type situation for Israel? Because Israel seems like a really smart fighter.
Yeah, he's gonna stand at range and he's gonna let Brunson kind of expose himself. He's not gonna pick him apart too much. I feel like it'll be Brunson overreaching on a punch, leaving himself exposed, and Israel clipping him on the chin and picking up the win. That's the way Israel sees it going. So I'm gonna have to side with my mate. Gonna have to side with Israel. And, yeah, he stops him with a knockout.
Beautiful. Go Izzy. Carl Roberson against Jack Marsham. 29 fights, Marsham. That's a lot against, well, I've got 6-1. I think that's the UFC record for Carl Roberson. He's probably had others as well. But pretty seasoned, Marshman.
Yeah, Marshman's the Welsh guy. He's from Wales. He's nice, tidy boxer. Like, he's a very experienced guy, very tough, weathers like a good storm, and he has very good punching with a lot of power and a lot of experience. Yeah, Robertson's a bit of a wild card. He is 6-1. I think he's coming off his first loss. He lost a submission, and 5 of his 6 wins have come in the first round. So of those only 7 fights, you know, when you have 5 of them finishing in the first round, that's not a heck of a lot of experience. So I feel like Marshman has just a wealth of experience and composure that comes with that experience. And I feel like when it comes to this level in the UFC, in this high-pressure situation, this is pretty high fight on the card for a Madison Square pay-per-view. And that, with it, comes like a lot of pressure. So I feel like Marshman will be able to deal with the pressure a lot better than Robertson. And I feel like he picks him apart on the feet and picks up the decision.
Third to last round, 2 big boys here. David Branch against the killer gorilla, Jared Cannonier.
Cannoneer.
Cannoneer. Very well-rounded fighter, David Branch, though. It's pretty even split for his victories between KO, submission and decision. So is he an all-around guy?
Yeah, he's a very experienced guy. He was a 2-division champion in World Series of Fighting, so that's another big Las Vegas-based promotion. And he was both middleweight and light heavyweight champion of that. And he's on a pretty hot streak. Of his last 13 fights, he's 12 wins, 1 loss, and their only 1 loss was to Luke Rockhold, which is one of the biggest stars in the division. So there's no real shame in that. Cannoneer, on the other hand, is a last-minute replacement. I think he's 3 wins, 4 losses in the UFC, and he's naturally a middleweight, I feel, but he's been fighting up at light heavyweight with not a lot of success. So not only is he a last-minute replacement for this fight, he's also moving back down in weight class. So I don't feel like this is going to play out very well for him with the very good striker in David Branch. I feel like Branch will pick him apart on the feet and stop him as he gets tired.
And then the main undercard, Chris Weidman against the Brazilian Ronaldo Souza, who's been a fantastic fighter in the UFC for a long while. Obviously a good striker, but most of his wins have come by submission.
Yeah, no, he's one of the best submission guys in the entire UFC. He has some of the best jiu-jitsu in the entire sport of MMA. It's just like, will he be able to use it against Chris Weidman? Because Chris Weidman is from a wrestling background and he has very strong wrestling defense. So I'm going to side with Weidman on the wrestling aspect. So I'm thinking that Weidman's wrestling will nullify the jiu-jitsu of Jacare. But this is a very interesting match because it's a last-minute change of opponent. Like, Luke Rockhold was supposed to fight Chris Weidman, but Luke Rockhold was forced to pull out with an injury. So Jacare, who was fighting David Branch, is now been moved up to the co-main event, and he's fighting Chris Weidman. So it's a last-minute change of opponent, which is very difficult at this level of the sport when you switch from a striker and now you're fighting like one of the best jiu-jitsu guys, a polar opposite of what you've been training for. So that adds an element of mystery to the kind of outcome, but I feel like the wrestling of Weidman will be too much, and I feel like he has the far better boxing when it actually comes down to it. So once he nullifies the takedown, I feel like he has the better striking, and he picks Jacare apart. And I'm looking for him to pick up a decision win here.
And then, holy smokes, load your cannons. Cormier against Derek Lewis. And I blinked twice when I saw Derek Lewis was fighting because he fought like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, he fought 3 weeks against Volkov, and this is a surprise to me because the amount of damage that Derek Lewis took in that fight. Like he was he was definitely down on the scorecards. While he was getting licked, let's just put it that way, he was eating a lot of punches. He definitely will have some injuries from that fight, from the strikes he took. He took a lot of kicks, which wear the body down. He also ate a lot of punches. I feel like he would have not been able to spar for the weeks after that. So I doubt that he's even done any sparring between that, because you obviously get concussions in the fight. He definitely would have had a concussion from that last fight, so I don't think he would have done any training for this. I feel like Daniel Cormier's taken this fight short notice. He actually turned down the former champion Stipe Miocic. He was offered Stipe Miocic. He didn't want Stipe on short notice because he felt like he was more of a threat. So he's taken Derek Lewis because he thinks it's easy money. He thinks he can take him down and out-wrestle with him. And I'm going to have to side with him on this one. I'm going to have to agree. I feel like he out-wrestles Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis, of course, always has the one-shot knockout potential, but I don't think that's enough against the heavyweight world champion Daniel Cormier. I feel like this won't be the most exciting fight in the world. I feel like Cormier is going to keep his distance, move away from that. He's going to close it as soon as he can, wrestle hard, and he's going to stay on top of Derek Lewis. I'm not so sure it'll be the first round. Maybe later in the fight, he might pick up a TKO win just because of the damage that Derek Lewis has worn and he's carrying from his last fight. But I feel like it's going to be a dominant display from Daniel Cormier with a late stoppage.
Because Derek Lewis's last fight, he was gassed and took all of that damage. He's got a massive reach advantage, about a 7-8 inch reach advantage over Daniel Cormier. But Cormier, if he's smart, it shouldn't be too tough for him. Just get him to burn all his petrol and then move in later.
Yeah, he could stay on the outside. Pretty much as soon as he gets a hold of Derek Lewis, this is not going to end very well. Just his wrestling credentials and his ability to grapple and his technique advantage in this fight is an unbelievable disparity in wrestling technique for this fight. And so as far as fights go, this is a pretty safe bet for Daniel Cormier.
And lastly, Dan, obviously in the last few weeks build up for your big battle with Barbosa over there in the US. What stage of your training are you at now?
It's picking up. I'm going to 7 days a week. So time moves like that when you're training 7 days a week. So between my training, my teaching, and then my family, it's, I got my nose to the grindstone at the stage.
Things looking good? You feeling good?
I feel good. Like this, as far as any training camp has gone, it's very easy for me to get up for this fight. It's very easy for me to focus in this fight because I have such a tough opponent.
Yeah, is this your biggest fight? Is this your toughest opponent? Like normally boxers always say, yes, it is. MMA, so much hinges on these. Like you can free fall if you don't win, and you can rock it if you win. Is this the biggest one, do you honestly think, in your career?
Yeah, 100%. This is the closest fight that will bring me to the title. I'm currently ranked number 13 in the world, and he's ranked number 5. So that's a pretty big jump if I can get the win over that. If I move up to number 6 or perhaps even number 5 with a dominant victory in this one, it catapults me into title contention in the lightweight division. So it's very exciting times coming up.
Do you allow yourself to get excited, or do you have to stay level?
Me, I stay pretty level-headed because I know the magnitude of the task in front of me. Edson Barbosa is warranted as one of the best fighters on the planet. So for me, I'm just looking forward to getting in there and testing my skills. I'm as interested as everyone else. Because how do I know if I'm the best fighter in the world unless I go out there and I actually test it? It's going pretty well as of now. So let's continue to rise. Let's continue the rise. Let's keep adding the difficulty of the challenge and see if I really am the best fighter in the world.
Dan the Handman Hooker, getting ready for the big dance in December. Thanks for joining us, talking about 230, and let's hope Izzy can kick off a pretty good Southern Hemisphere month in the UFC.
Lock it in.